This is project 4 of Hacking with Swift, in which you will make a classic beginner's user interface project, the web browser. For more information, please go to hackingwithswift.com, where you can buy this tutorial as a book, or indeed buy the whole series as a book. These books contain far more information and detail and help than these videos, so please do check them out. Alternatively, if you want a high resolution version of this video, you can buy that too on hackingwithswift.com. Finally, if you want to follow me on Twitter, please do ask questions, get in touch, be my best pal, whatever you feel like. I am at 2straws on Twitter. Okay, let's get coding. Go ahead and launch Xcode. Then choose Create a new Xcode project. Choose iOS Application Single View Application and press Next. Name it Project 4. For language, Swift. For devices, I don't mind what you choose. iPad, iPhone, Universal, it's all the same to me. Just make sure Core Data is not selected at all, ever in this entire series. Now press Next. Save it somewhere useful, like your desktop, and you'll have your basic project. So go ahead and press play with the device selected. I'll choose the iPhone 5S. Press play. It will build and run, launch simulator, install the app, and you'll see what it looks like, a large blank white screen. Fascinating. Let's embed that in a navigation controller so it looks slightly better. Go to main.storyboard, choose your view controller, go to editor, embed in navigation controller. We did this before in project 2, so this is not new. Move it around so it's nice and neat. There we go. Press play again. You'll see it look mostly the same, but now slightly different thanks to the navigation bar. That is our storyboard finished, remarkably, because this time we're going to be doing some new code. We're going to be looking at how to create your views in code rather than storyboards. Now, I personally prefer to do as much as I can storyboards because they're a really nice visual way of seeing what's right and what's wrong, but sometimes you have to do it in code. So we'll do that here. Go to viewcontroller.swift and you'll see view.load. This method is called by iOS when your layout, your storyboard for this view controller has been loaded and it's ready to go. Go ahead and configure it. We don't want to use our storyboard for this view controller. We want to do it by hand because we want to use a WebView, WebKit WebView. This is Apple's framework which powers Chrome, it powers Conqueror on Linux, it powers Safari on Mac. It's an extremely flexible, modern, powerful, friendly, and other adjectives toolkit. And it's available to use inside iOS. All the power of Safari you can embed right inside your app. All you have to do is go up here and say import WebKit. And that's it. Boom. You can start using WebKit straight away. It's that simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a property to store this WebView in our view controller. So up here we're going to say var WebView is a WKWebView ! So WKWebView is a WebKit WebView. Exclamation mark is required because when the view's first created, the WebView is not created, it's created by hand, and then it's not nil. So it could be nil, but it won't be nil by the time we use it, therefore it's exclamation mark. Then we want to make a new method before view.load. View.load's called after the view's finished loading. We want to load the view by hand, therefore we want a method called loadView. Use code completion to fill it in for you. And then we're going to create this WebView variable. We're going to say WebView equals WKWebView, like that. Just create a new WKWebView and put it inside the WebView variable. Then we're going to do something we haven't done before, which is to make ourselves a delegate of the WebView. So you say WebView.navigationDelegate equals self. Now this will cause Xcode to go nuts. You see it's erroring straight away. This is a wholly new concept that we're going to come back to in just a second after we write one more line of code. After that one, write self.view equals WebView. What that is saying is, before we had this empty white view into which we could place buttons or pictures, whatever we wanted, or even labels. Now we're saying actually our whole view is that WebView. We don't want a WebView inside a view, just make the whole thing a WebView. And that's a fairly common thing to do when you're customizing the entire screen with a new subtype like a WebView. Now the error, navigation delegate. Delegation is what's called a programming pattern. It's a way of writing your code, and it's used all over the place inside iOS, and for good reason, because it's very, very flexible. A delegate is one thing that acts in place of another thing, effectively answering questions and responding to events on its behalf. So we're using WebViews, right? Our WebView wants to navigate around and do things. It'll say, hey, should I go to this page? But by default, it just asks itself, and the WebView goes, yeah, it's fine, I don't care. By making navigation delegate us, the WebView will ask us the questions. It'll ask this view controller the questions. And we can say, actually, no, don't do that, or yes, do that, depending on our code. So it lets WebView transfer responsibility for questions and answers and some events to us to deal with, and we can respond appropriately. It still does nearly all the work, but we have the chance to intervene if we choose to. The reason Xcode is erroring is because, well, let's select this and see what the error message is. Perfect, look at that, Swift gets it right. Our view controller type here, this thing, does not conform to protocol WK navigation delegate. What that means is, if you want to set an object to be the navigation delegate of a WebView, it must conform to the protocol WK navigation delegate. It must fit the requirements of a WebKit navigation delegate. To make it conform to a protocol, you go up here, it says class view controller : UI view controller, add a comma, and then in this case we want WK navigation delegate. Like that. Boom. And now we're saying actually our class does conform to that. We're saying we promise it conforms. It does all the things required to be a proper full-fledged navigation delegate. And that's what it takes. The error's gone away, we can compile the code, it's good to go. So you might think, well, where's the point? We're promising it, but we're not doing anything. Well, actually, the protocol WK navigation delegate has a load of things behind it. Load of things. But that's optional, that's optional, that's optional, that's optional. They are all optional, which means to actually conform to it, all we have to do is say, yeah, we conform to it. We haven't got to do any work. So it's not too much of a problem. So we now conform to it. Our program will work. It won't do very much. You can have a look at it if you like. I'll press play now. It doesn't do very much. It's a sort of a scrolling white thing still. But we can at least start doing work with it. We could say, I want to load a web page in there. And this actually uses NSURL, which you met in the last project, project 4. So in view load, we're going to create a URL. We'll say let my URL equals NSURL http://www.slash.org news for geeks who are old like me. That creates an NSURL from that string. So it converts that string into an NSURL. Now remember, NSURLs are more than just strings. When it takes this information, it does parse it very nicely. So you can do things like url.host to find out, slash.org, for example, will be the host. So it's a very, very powerful thing. But this string here that I'm specifying could be, nonsense. Junk. That's not a URL, that's just junk. So this actually could fail, this call. It could fail to return anything. So which means it could be nil. It might not be nil. We don't know. So we either use it as an optional or we force unwrap it. Now we are actually putting in a correct URL. So we can just put an exclamation mark at the end and say, listen, trust me, it's fine. And it will work correctly every time. But web browsers, cunningly, don't load URLs because that'd be too easy. They load URL requests. So the URL request contains a URL. The URL contains a string. That's kind of a bit long-winded, but it works. So we're going to say WebView.load request, which takes an NSURL request. So NSURL request with URL being our URL variable, which we made a minute ago from a string. And just to add a little bit of magic, we're going to say WebView dot, and please use code completion for this, allows back-forward navigation gestures. So just type AL and find the right thing. Equals true. This is super cool. This is a standard thing in Safari, but it's available to all apps now. Go ahead and run it. You'll see your thing load up. Give it a few seconds. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not actually online. Let's go online for a second. There we go. And run that again. This time, hopefully, it will connect. And there we go. /dot. Brilliant news site not. It's loaded in there. And we can click on links and they navigate to there correctly and it'll eventually load. And all being well, hello, are you going to load anything for me? Try that one perhaps. Really? Oh, that one loaded. Oh, because they've got some fancy animation thing going on. Thanks, /dot. Anyway, so you can navigate to and from, and with the property we set, which is allows back-forward navigation gestures, you can swipe back and forward to get to pages like that, which kind of looks strange because they've got this weird animation thing going on their page, but that's what it does. It lets you use gestures to navigate around the back-forward stack in Safari, just by having that one thing to be true. Very, very simple, very cool. So that is getting our basic view up and running. We want to let users choose from a list of pre-approved websites. So we're going to get rid of this code here. Actually, let's just comment that temporarily. And we're going to add a right bar button item, as we saw in the project 3. And in this, we want to have a new open tapped method, which we haven't written yet, we'll write shortly, which will create a UIAlertController, which you saw as well in project 2. So, building up some knowledge now, you're starting to reuse stuff, which is good. So in view.load, you want to say navigation item dot right bar button item equals UIBarButtonItem. This time, not bar button system item, but title. And give it a quote and open like that. For style, it doesn't matter because it's irrelevant. Just type .plain. Target, who should be told? We want to be told. And what method should be called? We'll call it open tapped. Like that. That creates the button and makes it call open tapped, which we haven't got defined yet. Let's do that now. So let's create a new method called func open tapped, parenthesis open brace. And this thing's going to use UIAlertController using the action sheet style. We use the alert style in project 2. Action sheet is the preferred way of asking for more information from users. What do you want to open? So we're going to say a new constant, AC, for alert controller equals UIAlertController, the title, open page, like that. And then message, we don't want a message, just nil's fine. Open page is more enough. And for style, dot action sheet. These are things that slide up from the bottom of the screen with more information. We're going to add some actions to here. So we're going to say ac.addAction, UIAlertAction. We're going to add 3 actions. So the first one will be, let's say, apple.com with the style default, just a normal button. Then handler will say open page. We haven't written that just yet. I'll come back to that in a second. Then copy and paste that a couple of times. And then let's have a look. So apple.com, then let's have /dot again beneath it. And for the last one, we're going to have a cancel button. So cancel. And the style for those ought to be .cancel, not .default. And cancel, all it has to do is dismiss the alert controller. We don't do anything, we don't open a page. So for handler, just put nil. And when you've got a nil handle, it means just get rid of the action sheet and spin on. Finally, present view controller AC, animated true, completion nil. So this is relatively old, apart from the .cancel thing. We haven't written the open page method just yet. We'll do that in a second. Otherwise, this is kind of thing you've seen before in project 2, so it's not too surprising. So both these buttons, apple.com and /dot.org, both call the open page method, which we'll write now. If you remember, the ask question method from project 2 had to accept a UI alert action saying which one was tapped, and this is where it becomes helpful. So go ahead and add a new method called func open page, and it needs a parameter, the alert action, so action, UI alert action, like that. Now, helpfully, these things require you to accept as a parameter the action that was tapped, which is wonderful because we can then take that and say, fine, what's the title of the action that was tapped? Oh, apple.com, load that page. So we can actually create a URL from that. We can say let URL equals NSURL string. Now you do need to prefix it with http:// So you want to do http:// plus action.title. So the title of the thing that was tapped. So that will make it http:// apple.com. If you don't have that, it doesn't work very well, so you do need to include it. Again, we have to make it force unwrapped with the exclamation mark. So you're saying, listen, the NSURL is definitely correct. We've checked it. We will do more advanced stuff later, but for now it's good enough. We've got URL, which should now say WebView load request with NSURL request URL like that. Build it, run it, and you'll see the open button there. Press that and you'll see open page apple.com or /. Let's try apple.com. Boom. Very, very simple. Fantastic. So that's what it takes just to get the user having some sort of control over the interface. I'm going to re-enable these lines now. So what will happen is by default it will load /. when the thing starts. Oops, re-enable them by doing that. It will load /. by default. And they can change their mind later based on the list we give them. So one thing we haven't done yet is fill this navigation bar with anything useful. You know, we've got this big gap here, and we could very easily put in there the title of the page that was loaded. But this presents a problem. How do we know when the web view has finished loading? Well, we know that because of this line of code. Navigation delegate is us, which means when anything interesting happens for navigation, the web view will call methods on our class, our view controller. Now, we haven't got any special methods in there, but these already come predefined. And what happens is iOS says, hey, I finished loading. Do you have a method called this thing? If so, I'll call it and tell you what happened. Otherwise, I'll do nothing. That's why they're optional. So it checks first if you have a method that supports the thing you're trying to look at. If you do, it calls it. If it doesn't, it ignores it. So we can actually use this web view's method navigation methods to do things. So find some space and then write web. And these are the possible things you can implement. Decide policy for navigation action, the navigation response. Did fail, did finish, whatever you want. Did finish, in this case, is exactly what we want. This will be called, if it exists, this will be called by the web view when it has finished loading its page. So we can press enter to fill that method in, and then we can add some code to that. Now, all we have to do really is say our title equals the web view's title, which is the page title. Now press play. You'll see it will load /. by default, and in the title now appears /. Same for open apple.com. There's Apple. So it makes the whole UI a bit nicer. It's getting the page title from the web view and putting it straight into that navigation bar, which is fantastic. So this, of course, is just a dummy project, so I can force new things into your Swift brain. And the things you'll be learning this time about are including UIToolbar. So you see in the navigation bar, that's this thing at the top where you've got these buttons at the top. And the title. A toolbar normally sits at the bottom and contains a whole array of buttons, as many as you like, within reason of space, of course. We'll use that to have a button in there to do stuff. We'll also introduce you to UIProgessView. So UIProgessView is, it shows a readout of how long a task is taking. It's a progress bar, very common on every other OS, and they exist in iOS too. So we've already seen UIBarButtonItem, that thing, and it's not called UI Navigation Bar Button Item. It's just called generally UIBarButtonItem because that same class for making buttons also exists, also works inside toolbars, which is fantastic. So we can go ahead and create more bar button items to do stuff and put it into a toolbar and put that into our view controller. Now, helpfully, UI navigation controller, that's this thing doing this bar at the top and the pushing and popping in project 1, has a built-in toolbar we can use. It's very, very helpful. What happens is you give your view controller, our thing here, some toolbar items, tell the navigation controller, hey, show the toolbar, I've got something to show, and it will do the rest of the work for us. It's really, really simple. So go to view did load, make some space just before the end, and we're going to create some new buttons. Firstly, we'll create a refresh button, reload the current page. So let refresh equals UIBarButtonItem, and then we want to have system item dot refresh, target self, action is refresh tapped. So I'll call a method called refresh tapped, like that. I'll make that now. So it's just called, put it under just another open tab perhaps. Func refresh tapped, parenthesis, open brace. To make the web browser reload, what we have to do is say WebView.reload. That's it. It's super simple. In fact, it's so simple, we don't even need this refresh tap method at all. We can actually say the target for our button is the WebView. And for action, just use reload. And it essentially calls WebView.reload for us. You don't even need that code at all. So you can do it both ways, whatever way floats your boat. So that's the refresh button. We also want to have a spacer. Now with a toolbar, if you look at your screen layout here, a toolbar has buttons going all across the way. But if you want a button aligned to the right, nothing button, that's when you want a spacer, a flexible space. This is like a spring. If you place a spacer here, a flexible space here, it will fill all the space it can, pushing that button to the right. So let's create that now. Let's say let spacer equals UIBarButtonItem. It's got a special type called .flexible_space. Target, when it's tapped, well, it can't be tapped, so nil. Select a nil, we don't care, it's never tapped. Now we have a spacer, we have a refresh button. What we have to do is assign those two to our view controller's toolbar items property. You can see it takes an optional array of any object. So toolbar items equals array containing spacer, then refresh, like that. I won't do anything just yet because the toolbar is not visible by default. We have to say navigation controller dot toolbar hidden equals false. And notice how I inserted the question mark for us. Just let it do that. It knows what to do. So show the toolbar with these toolbar items. You can go ahead and press play now. And we're starting to get somewhere. There's our toolbar correctly with the page scrolling around it. With lovely translucency effect as well. Very nice iOS. With page reloading, which won't do very much. Well, there you are, those are top again. It just reloads the page. So that so far is working. But what if you want to put something else in there? We want to put a progress view in there. We want to have in here how much of the page has loaded. Very, very common in web browsers, particularly because in the old days, browsing the web was slow. In the old days of the internet, browsing the web was slow because everything came via carrier pigeon. Even today, having a progress view is very common, largely because on phones particularly, or 3G iPads, you could have a terrible connection. Where I live, in deepest, darkest England, the connection here can be utterly appalling sometimes. If you're on a train, you've got no chance. So you do want to have some sort of progress bar in there saying how far you've loaded. So we're going to add a new property next to WebView. We're going to add var progress view is a UI progress view. And that thing shows progress of a task over time. It's a little bar going by. And we're going to create this thing just after the WebView. So we'll say progress view equals UI progress view, like that. And you'll see it takes a progress view style. Just use .default. Just give me a default one. There is a bar version, but default looks perfectly fine, quite frankly. Then you can size it however you want to, or you can just say progress view.size to fit, which means you just figure out your default size and it'll do the rest for you. Now, how do we put that into our array of toolbar items? Now, you might think, let's just put it in here. Let's put progress view, then the spacer, then the refresh button. And look, it's fine. It compiles perfectly fine. Fantastic. First time. Thanks very much, Swift. Press play. Let's see this progress view. Boom. Crash. Terminator with uncore exception. Bail, die. Doesn't like it. The reason is because this array expects an array of UIBarButtonItems. Now, Swift does not know any better. If you look at it, it says any object. Like I said, this whole any object thing is a bit of a Objective-C hangover. It expects every one of them to be UIBarButtonItems. You can't just put a progress view in there. It's not allowed. So the solution is to create a little wrapper. you can create a bar button item with a custom view inside it. So rather than having a system item or a title, we can actually say let progress button equals UIBarButtonItem, then custom view. And any UI view, it's any button or label or image view or progress view, whatever you want, can go in there, any type of UI view. So we'll just put in there progress view. Boom. And that wraps it up inside a UIBarButtonItem, and that button can go inside the array. So we'll put in here progress button. And now press build and play. And you'll see this grayish bar, which will fill up. If we were to put in there, say, progress view dot progress equals 0.5, you'll see it's partly blue. So that we can set up progress and it fills in nicely as the page will load. Now, here's something very interesting, and by very interesting I mean unnecessarily hard, but you have to learn it. We want to know how well this web page is loading. Is it 50%, 75%, 98%? Who knows? And you might think that's inside WK Navigation Delegate. Sadly, it is not. WK Navigation Delegate is for things like, should we open this page? We're finished opening this page. It doesn't say, updates along the way. However, Apple has an insanely powerful technique called KeyValue Observing. And it exists in so many places in the Apple framework. If you learn it this one time, you'll be able to use it again and again and again. And it basically lets you say, please tell me when property X of object Y has changed by anyone at any time. So we can basically subscribe to updates and it will tell us when it changes. And we're going to do exactly that because for WebView, these have a thing I'll show you in code completion, WebView.estimated progress. And that tells you how far through loading the WebView is. We can use that, we can watch that property using KVO. Not particularly pleasant syntax, but you haven't got a choice, so get over it. Just for the end of view to load, add this. WebView.addObserver. We want to observe something happening. So who is the observer? Well, self is. We are the observer. We want to be told. Key path. This is a badly named, but with good reason, parameter. What it means is, what property do you want to observe? And in our case, we want to observe, quotes, estimated progress. Now, it's called key path rather than just for property because the key paths can be very complicated. You can observe a thing within a thing within a thing. You can even add some functionality in there. You can say, hey, I've got an array of stuff. Could you average it? And that's actually a key path. Average all these things for me is a key path. It's very powerful. For options, you want to say .new. So you're asking it, when this value changes, give me back the new value. You could ask the old value, but where's the point in that? We want the new value. What is it now? And finally, context. You can provide something there, or in our case, nil. Now, context can be very useful. If you want to find out why, it's in the book. Let's spin on and write some more code. When we've done that, when we are the observer of a web view, it will tell us whenever the estimated progress value changes. And it will do this by calling a method which you must now implement called observeValueForKeyPath. Big long one. Please use code completion. And this will be called whenever a value is changed. So we could say, listen, we're getting a key path in. Is that key path equal to estimated progress? So we can say if key path equals estimated progress. Now remember, that needs to be two equal signs. If you have one equal sign, you'll get whinged at. Two equal signs. Open brace, close brace. So if key path is estimated progress, then do something. And in our case, the estimated progress will be between 0 and 1, not loaded and fully loaded. And our progress view also has 0 to 1 by default. You can change that, but it's 0 to 1 by default. 0, no blue line, and 1, 100% blue line. But cunningly, I say cunningly, but I really mean stupidly, There are two ways of handling these kinds of numbers between 0 and 1, like 0.5, or even bigger numbers like 3001.1, or even pi, 3.141592654, and so on. These are decimal numbers to us. They have numbers after the decimal place. And in Swift, there are multiple ways of representing that, and they mean subtly different things. And cunningly, different frameworks use different ways of representing numbers, which is not helpful at all, but there you go. So you type in WebView dot estimated progress, you'll see it returns a double. Double means a double precision floating point number. That means an extremely accurate floating point number. If you were to type ProgressView.progress, you would see it takes float, a regular floating point number, a single, a not so accurate floating point number as a double. So a float is either not as accurate or can't hold quite so large numbers. You can choose, it's the way they work. Float's still big and still very accurate, but double is even more accurate. So we've got a problem. We're getting a double. We need to give a float. Fortunately, the thing is simple. We just say ProgressView.progress equals make a new float from the value of the double, like that. And that, in the same way we converted from arc4 random's uint32 data type, which is useless, to an int by just saying, hey, I don't care what it is, just convert to an int, please, by making a new int. This is the same thing. It creates a float from the double. And if you run now, surprisingly, that's all it takes. That is KVO. It's complicated, but it works. See this blue bar filling up there? I'll try apple.com, watch carefully. Starts off and then fills up. So that's KVO. We're now being told every time the estimated progress value has changed, we'll get told, and we can update our UI to respond to it. Very, very simple. So that's our UI more or less done. But there's a sort of fatal flaw here, I think, quite frankly, because we've got this app, which is essentially a way to restrict the websites that can be opened, which you can customize however you want to. But it's got a bit of a flaw because, well, let's face it, multiple flaws, but the main flaw we care about is that anyone can get anywhere on the web, really, because they can start off, say, on Slashdot there, but they can just tap a link. They can go from here to any of these news sites, from there to any other website, from there to any other website, and it's like 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. They can pretty much be around any part on the web in 10 clicks. So it's not a brilliant restricted web browser, quite frankly. So we have two options here. We can either say, have a check saying, are you trying to open apple.com? Are you trying to open slashdot.org? And essentially copy and paste our list twice, which isn't great. And that kind of thing is easy to write, but it's not easy to maintain, quite frankly, so we don't want to do that. The other solution is called refactoring. And refactoring is rewriting your code with a purpose. Whether the code purpose is to make it more efficient, to make it easier to read, to reduce its complexity, to make it more flexible. I'm not sure what the purpose will be, but the idea is to improve the code somehow. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to refactor our code, so we'll make a shared array of websites, apple.com, slashdot.org, whatever you like. And we'll use that both in this alert controller and in our check to see if the site's valid or not. So, up where we have our properties, these two, WebView and ProgressView, declare a new one called websites. So var websites equals, and we'll have our same two sites, apple.com /.org. Please add better ones, knock yourself out. That's an array containing the websites we want the user to be able to visit. So with that change, we can immediately say, well, actually, we don't want to hard code this string in here because it might not be in here anymore. It's a different set of stuff. We want to have in here, we want to have http:// then wherever the first item is in our websites array, like that. And then load that. So far, dead easy. The next change is to make our UI alert controller use that same websites array for its list of alert actions, because we're putting them in by hand here. So we want to scrap these two lines entirely and replace them with a for loop, which you've seen before, nothing new. So let's just do for website in websites, do something. In this case, basically, I'll just take that one to ease of use. Want to add with the title, which would just be website. Style default, handle open page. Brilliant. Delete the second one. That's it, done. So that will add one alert action object for each item in our array. Again, not very complicated. Now the final change is something new, and it belongs to the WK navigation delegate protocol that we conformed to earlier. This has got a load of optional methods, which, if they exist, will be called, which is fantastic. We're going to add something to here called decide policy for navigation action. And what will happen is this will be called when the user tries to navigate somewhere, and we can choose, should this happen or should it not happen? Down to us. So look through, so I'll find some space here, perhaps before it did finish, and type in WebView. Then look for decide policy for navigation action. You'll see there's two, response here and action here. You want to go for action. Before it actually happens, this is action. Let it fill in the code for you. Now this delegate callback is interesting because it gives us some complicated parameters. So first up, the navigation action. What were they trying to do? Was it because they clicked a link? Was it because they submitted a form or typed in a URL? Who knows what? And where they're trying to go, and so on and so forth. But curiously, it also takes this decision handler here. So you'll see this is messy. And what it means is it is giving you some code to execute. Now, this might confuse you, so hold on tight to something. This decision handler method actually contains code. And we kind of used this stuff before when we had the ask question method in project 2. We had a handler for the UI alert actions, which, like here, we have open page. That is a method call open page, which is down here. But you can actually pass in code directly into there and say, here is the code you want to use for your handler, which is fine. And these are called closures. CLOSURE, a closure, a chunk of code which looks and works and acts like a variable, which is strange. You think, why can't I just return true from this method? Yes, please load the method. But it's way bigger than that. You're given this code, decision handler, which is literally something you can call. You can say, call decision handler, like that, and call it and pass something into it and it will call. So you could just return true or return false, but actually by having this variable function thing, this closure, you can store it away somewhere and have something happen first. You can say, ask the user, hey, this wasn't in your list of safe sites. Are you sure you want to go here? And if they tap yes, then you can call decision handler. You couldn't do that with a single function return value. You can't just say yes, return true from this and load the page, because that means it has to return immediately. By having a closure, you can store that function code away somewhere and call it later, which is much, much more powerful. What we're going to do is quite simple. We're going to say, get the navigation action, this thing, find out the request's URL, and then have a look at it. So let's start with that. First, let's make a constant. Let URL equals navigation action, dot request dot URL, just to avoid typing. That's our URL. We're now going to optionally unwrap part of that URL. That's the power of NSURL. It parses the full website into bits for us. So we're going to try and read if let host equals URL.host. You see it's an optional string. Does this URL have a host, i.e. /.org? If so, it'll go into host. If not, it'll do nothing at all. So we unwrap that carefully using if let. So host, if it works, if it has a value, will now be a string containing the host, the website they're trying to load. What we're going to do is we're going to whiz through all the websites in our array and see if that host is one of our approved websites. Like this, we'll say for website in websites. Then if host.range of string, like that, range of string. And you'll see this takes a zillion parameters. Don't worry, they're all optional except the first one. You can just say range of string website, much easier. Is not nil, then do something. So what we're doing again here is we find the host of the URL if it exists. So /.org or apple.com, whatever you want. We then loop through all our websites to see if we can find the host, if we find our website inside the host. So can we find /.org inside the host they're actually visiting? And we are doing it this way for a particular reason, which is that we're accessing these sites from an iPhone. And many websites nowadays, if you go to say /.org, silently redirect you to be m./.org or something like that, a mobile version of the site. So if we were to do a direct comparison, does our websites array contain the host or not, it might fail half the time because there's like, www.2.apple.com or m./.org or whatever. All we care about really is that the host at least contains part of our approved website, which means m./. works, regular / works, whatever. It all works. All the variations work just by doing that range of string check. So if this thing returns not nil, so not equals, that means exclamation mark equals means not equals nil. If we get a range of string back, if it's found the website inside the host, then we're going to call that weird handler thing, the closure, saying allow it, .allow. So literally, this is a function that's going to get called, or a method that's going to get called, saying allow the navigation to happen. Very easy, but only if we have got a host and it's inside our websites array. We then use a keyword called return. A return means exit this method immediately. We've made our mind up, get out. Don't execute any more code. Which means if we get to this point here, we know these checks have failed. They're trying to go to an unauthorized website. We're not going to allow this. And so replace that with, decision handler .cancel. Do not let them to get through because it's a bad website for whatever reason. So we unwrap the host carefully, check to the host list of websites, see if any of them vaguely match the website. If so, we allow it and get out. Otherwise, we cancel navigation as soon as possible. So with that in place, that kind of finishes the project. And that wasn't too hard, I think. Press run now. And you'll see the site loading. That's apple.com. We're going to go ahead and load /. And I'm going to try and get to that site. Nothing. Ain't going to do it. Refuse to do it. It's Wikipedia. No. I refuse to load Wikipedia. Not going to do it. Load /. That's fine. Just not Wikipedia. So we have to add those things to our allowed list as we go. So as you can see, using this closure thing, even though it's confusing, it does allow you not only to give code to someone to execute, like we're doing here, execute open page when the button's clicked. It also allows you to receive code to execute in the case of our decision handler. Do this thing when we are ready. So that's another project done. You've gone over things again like NSURL, but you've also met new stuff. You've met UIToolbar, you've met LoadView, you've met WebKit and WKWebView. You've learned about delegation. Delegation is really powerful, and you'll see it again and again and again. You've met KVO, KeyValue Observing. This is something I've met. I've met some medium-level developers who've never used KVO, and now you have. So you're ahead of the game already. And of course, you had UIProgessView inside a UIBarButtonItem inside the toolbar, which is very, very cool. So yes, we've made another simple project, but at the same time, you've learned tons and tons about new Swift technologies, new iOS technologies too. Reminder, please go to the website hackingwithswift.com. If this stuff is at all helpful to you, please support my work. Buy a book for a few bucks. Buy the whole series for lots of bucks, or like many, to be fair, it's quite cheap. Buy the high-res videos, or find me on Twitter and give me all your praise and love. I am @2straws.